Hey everyone, it's Ornlu. I just had an hour to kill, and I had been, thinking about balance discussion and like game design, general thoughts and stuff. A fair bit recently. Obviously, it's always posted all the time on Reddit and AOE Zone. So I thought I'd just take the opportunity to go in, share my general thoughts on like balance changes I'd make, and like overall I guess the overall design of the game right now as it stands with patch 5.7. So yeah, these are just my opinions, but I've been wanting to do this sort of game discussion video for a while. I've just been pretty busy. So yeah, I'm just gonna go through the tech tree and hopefully not rant too much for all of you. So yeah, let's get right into it. All right, everybody, so here we are in the tech tree. And before I jump into the civilization changes I would or would not make, I'm going to talk about some general, like global changes I would make, and I guess sort of talk about where I think the game is right now. And honestly, I think the game is overall fairly well balanced. Yeah, there certainly is plenty of things to change, but I think the game in general, there's like more viable civilizations and map types and strategies, like much more so than there's ever been in Age of Empires. So I think that the direction that we're going is actually pretty good. But of course, with that said, we're not there yet, in my opinion, but the sort of changes that we need for the most part are just sort of like small like tweaks, like a tech here, a number tweak there. Nothing like overall massive like redesigning Age of Empires, because the base game is excellent. It's why we still play it. With that said, again, I think in general the new civs are a little bit overtuned and kind of power creep some of the old civilizations. So I think generally speaking, it would be good for the new civilizations to be brought back down in power level to the old ones. Just because I think where the old Age of Kings, Age of Conquerors civilizations stand right now is a pretty good spot for balance. So with that said, let's get into these specific changes. Just have a few list of things that like I would change globally. First, coinage and banking. I'd move these two techs to the Imperial Age. We see a lot in Battle of Africa recently, and then of course team game tournaments since the dawn of time. Slinging is just really, really powerful, and honestly not particularly fun to watch or play. You just, it's not particularly skill intensive to sling, and I think making it viable in the late game is a really nice thing to have in team games. But I don't really think someone should just be able to chill in the feudal age and make or sling a teammate just so they can get like 1,000 knights by minute 30. Yeah, not a fan. Next change, I would remove the gold cost of Town Patrol. So Town Watch is an amazing upgrade. It only costs 75 food. It takes 25 seconds to research. And yeah, it's just gives you so much warning when it comes to, especially in the early game, units potentially harassing your villagers or whatever, especially like your wood lines, your gold mines, etc. But its counterpart, the sort of graduation of Town Watch, Town Patrol, is just never researched because it costs gold and 300 food, which is quite a bit. And I think, obviously these effects compound so that having +8 LOS for your buildings is like a lot. So it shouldn't be like, something you can easily pick up in early Castle Age. But I think for the Imperial Age, it's a tech that never sees play. So I think it wouldn't hurt to remove the gold cost on this tech, just making it the 300 food. Next up on the block here, we have arrow slits, which was certainly a problem tech, to say the least, when African Kingdoms first launched. And now it was nerfed, and now it never sees play. Unless you're maybe Koreans. So the way that they changed it from where it was initially is it used to be in the Castle Age, and now it's obviously in the Imperial Age. And it used to give +2, +4, +6, I believe, attack to the towers, with Watchtower, Guard Tower, Keep being the distinction there. And I think if you just revert one of those changes, I think the tech will be fine. It won't be as oppressive as when it was in the beginning of African Kingdoms, but it will be a bit more usable than it is right now. Personally, I would like to see this tech move to the Castle Age, just because getting the arrow slits out in the Castle Age would be pretty useful for Korean players, but I'll get to them later. Don't worry, I don't want to make the Korean Trush stronger. But I think Korean towers in general should be good, and also maybe Japanese towers or Britain towers. So I think that would be a pretty good idea. Next up, we have everybody's favorite Aztec monk HP increasing tech, herbal medicine. This tech is just not great. Your units still heal pretty slowly inside buildings, and it's fairly expensive on the gold cost, and it just is never used except from the Aztecs, and that's just to get the extra monk HP. So I think there's plenty of things you can do with this tech. I think you just redesign the tech, and I personally would give it, you get extra healing range for your monks. Obviously, the Teutons already have like that a bit as a bonus, so maybe there's a better idea out there. I'm certainly not sold on this, like one way or the other. I just think this tech needs to be changed. And I kind of like the idea of increasing the healing range for monks. Next, we have the Fire Galley. Something obviously needs to be done about the water line, and in my view, demolition rafts are pretty good at countering fire galleys, and fire galleys are good at countering galleys. And, or rather, galleys are good at countering demo rafts, but fire galleys are just so hard to deal with if you're, trying to make galleys. And in AOC, like, Galley Micro was really, interesting to watch. It was very skill intensive, a lot more so than fire galleys in the expansion. So I still think fire galleys are good. I think we want sort of unit diversity in water engagements. I just think maybe reducing the Pierce armor by 1 on fire galleys, so down to 3. I think that might be a way to help out galleys in the early game, especially if you are a Viking player who doesn't have access to fire galleys. Next, I'll address the elephant in the room, because, they're battle elephants. So I think that battle elephants in general are way too weak in 1v1s, but on the other hand, way too strong in team games. So the change I would make to battle elephants would be to reduce their cost from 120 food and 70 gold to 110 food and 70 gold, so 10 food cheaper per elephant. But then I would also reduce the health of the elephants down to 200 health for the non-elite battle elephant from 250, and then 250 health for the elite battle elephant down from 300. So 50 less health per elephant. That makes these units obviously individually weaker and less oppressive, I think, in the late game when you're able to get to those sort of high population count armies, where battle elephants are just so insanely population efficient that it's just really hard for civilizations to deal with. But making them cheaper and a bit weaker, I think, also helps in 1v1s, so that the elephants, you're not just spending so many resources just to have these guys instantly converted in like smaller numbers in the Castle Age. So I kind of like that change. Next we have Cav Archers. I don't necessarily think they need to change, but I think it would be worth experimenting with making their wood cost slightly lower. I definitely don't think you reduce their gold cost, but 40 wood per Cav Archer is quite a bit. And I don't really think they're very viable with any civilization other than the Huns and the Turks and the Magyars, and maybe the Indians. So I think making these guys a little bit cheaper on the wood front would help civilizations like the Saracens really be able to utilize these units much more effectively, or the Japanese as well. It's just, in the Castle Age, it's so hard to get enough of them out to make them cost-effective, unless you are the Huns, or, maybe the Magyars. So I think it's something definitely worth experimenting, but we don't want a Chariot Archer situation from Age of Empires 1, so obviously we have to be very careful when balancing units that are fast and ranged. So maybe for that one. Lastly, for the sort of general changes, I would make the Eagle Warriors in the Castle Age take slightly longer to create. So currently it is 35 seconds. I don't really know the exact number you boost it up to, but maybe 40 seconds. Because, yeah, it's a minute in the Feudal Age and 35 seconds in the Castle Age. That is a massive difference. And I think maybe making it 40, possibly even 45 seconds would make Eagle Warriors a little less oppressive from the Meso civs in the Castle Age. But other than that, I think the unit is okay. Obviously, it's supposed to be a very strong unit because none of the Meso civs have cavalry. So yeah, I think they just need to be a little less quick to create in the Castle Age so they don't just instantly overwhelm archers. So now I'll go through all 31 civilizations and not spend too much time on most of them, hopefully, because I think that, again, the game is pretty well balanced. So I don't think there are too many changes that need to be made. And we're going to start, we're just going to go alphabetically. We're going to start here with the Aztecs. And this is nice and easy. I don't really think you need to change the Aztecs. Assuming that the Eagle Warrior creation time is increased from the general changes I said earlier, I think the civilization is fine. It's a strong civilization on open maps and arena, but it's awful on water maps, and it's awful pocket and team games, but good on flank. Yeah, I mean, I think the civilization's fine. It's a very powerful civilization, obviously, but I don't think it's too oppressive. Again, if you just make these changes to the Eagle Warriors. So yeah, that one was nice and easy. Next up, we have the Berbers here. This one is not so quick, because the Berbers, I think, need a few changes. I think the civilization does way too much. In my opinion, this civilization just really power creeps out civilizations like the Saracens, and to a lesser extent the Persians. Because these guys just do so much. They have such a broad tech tree, and I think that they need to lose a bit of their sort of versatility. Because I don't think the civilization's supposed to be like the insanely diverse late game civilization that it is right now. And the changes I would make would be removing hand cannoneer for the civilization. The civilization already has powerful ranged options. It has genitours. It has the camel archer. And I think giving them hand cannoneer is just a little too much. It gives them just such easy ways of dealing with infantry that yeah, I think that's just a little too much. And in that same line of thinking, I would remove the guilds tech for the civilization. The civilization is already a post-imperial age dominant powerhouse civilization with amazing late game options. With the Genitor, which is an amazing trash unit that doesn't that's very population efficient in large numbers, and they also have the cheapest hussars in the game. Sorry, Magyars, and that's it's so powerful in the late game, especially in 1v1s. And the fact that you can even then get a good or at least a better food and wood to gold trade from guilds, I think that's just too much for the civ in the late game, again, especially in 1v1s. So I'd remove those two techs. I've gone back and forth on having the civilization lose ring archer armor and then gaining Parthian tactics, but I don't think that would be too necessary. I don't think that would make that much of a difference one way or the other. So I don't know. Maybe, but I don't really think that's necessary. But beyond that, I guess the civilization's fine. It's really fun to play. I just think they're too diverse. Britons, this one I think is pretty straightforward. I think the Britons are fine. They're good on a lot of different map types, and they're not terribly oppressive on any one map type. They have a fairly broad tech tree, but with some very obvious holes with the missing bloodlines, missing thumb ring, and siege, like bombard cannons, gunpowder in general. So yeah, I think they're fine. I don't think you need to change the Britons. Oh boy, now we have the Burmese. This is another civilization that really seems to do way too much, especially in the late game. Like, yes, their archer line in the late game is awful, but they have some of the best infantry in the game because of their extra attack, some of the best cavalry in the game because they have the second best elephants behind the Khmer, but they also have Hussar. They have amazing monks, and they have pretty good siege. Like, that's so much. Also, they have an insanely good economy. So, yeah, just to start there, I'd remove guilds for this civilization because, again, this civilization is already this way too much, way too well in the late game. Um, and then I would also remove the bombard cannon because you can't have it all, right? The Burmese shouldn't have just absolutely, a solid siege with everything else being really, really strong for this civilization, again, minus their archers. So yeah, I'd remove Bombard Cannon. The civilization would still have perfectly adequate siege. To have Capram, Onager, Heavy Scorpion, and Siege Engineers, that's perfectly serviceable in most games. So I think that's a easy switch to do there. And then finally, yeah, this guy. This guy here, the Arambai. It's way too good. It's like a conquistador, but better. Mostly owing to their wood cost, costing 50 wood instead of the food cost for conquistadors, and then their attack rate is 2, if I recall correctly. Yeah. So that's way too good. There have been a lot of suggestions as to how exactly to nerf this unit here. I kind of like the idea of making them cost food, but then I don't know. That's like a lot of overlap with conquistadors. I think that we should remove the pierce armor for this unit because the normal Arambai has 2 pierce armor and the elite one has, I guess, 3. Yeah, this unit shouldn't have pierce armor. Archers should be like very effective against this unit, kind of like it is with the Conquistador. But once the Arambai get to even reasonably large numbers, they can just mow down crossbowmen and arbalests. So yeah, I think removing the pierce armor might be the change that this unit needs. But maybe it would even need something more. I'm not 100% sure. Obviously, we can't really playtest these unless, you're working at FE or something. Okay, now we have the Byzantines. The civilization, I think, is in a pretty good spot. Going back to the whole town patrol thing earlier, I'd give the civilization free town patrol, as well as free town watch. I think that's fine. And I guess kind of boosts the civ identity as a defensive civilization. And then the only other change I would do is I would reduce the upgrade cost for Elite Cataphract by a little bit. Maybe like 1,200 food or 550 gold. I think that would be fine. It's a little hard to get into cataphracts, especially compared to a lot of other powerful unique units, especially like new unique units. So I think tuning down the upgrade cost to the elite is pretty reasonable. You still have to get Logistica if you really want to make these guys powerful. But beyond that, the civilization's pretty good. And, not like oppressive, but just a solid civilization on many map types. Celts are next. This civilization is another one of those civilizations that's pretty much fine, in my opinion. It's good on a lot of map types. It has very powerful units in their siege line, obviously, as well as their very strong infantry. But, unlike some of the newer civs, looking at you Berbers and Burmese and Malians later, they actually have costs for having, really powerful late game options. Because they don't have Bloodlines, and they don't have Thumb Ring, and they don't have Arbalest. So, obviously, those are, really important techs that the civ misses, which I think makes the civilization balanced. And, kind of the getting more towards the power level I think that we want more of those civilizations in the game to fall into. Moving on to the Chinese here, I think they're in a pretty decent situation. I think they're definitely a victim of power creep with a lot of the newer civilizations. Like, other than nomad starts, the civilization doesn't really excel on any map types. And I think some small changes we can make with the civilization would be to have them receive guilds. Kind of like how I took away guilds from other civilizations. I guess I'm addicted to guilds or something. But in the late game, I don't see why Chinese can't have guilds. They're supposed to be a late game defensive civilization. And yeah, I think just getting that little bit of help would go a long way. The other change I would make would be to give them Hussar. This one I'm, less confident on, I guess, and, would want to make sure it's not too oppressive. But I think it's not a super big deal. The civilization's kind of like defining weakness in the late game is to siege onagers, because it just does not have a good way of dealing with siege onagers. And Hussars are okay at dealing with siege onagers, but they're not really that much better than light cav. And of course, it would give Chinese a fully fleshed out trash line, which kind of fits this civilization's theme of being the, do a little bit of everything, obviously with those cheaper technologies. So I think that would be not a bad idea. But it's not like the civilization's awful. Next, we have Ethiopians. Ethiopians are fine. I think that with the removal of the free halberdier upgrade, I think the civilization's in a perfectly fine position. I don't think they need any changes. They're good, but they're not, again, absolutely oppressive. Franks are a really interesting civilization these days because after all their buffs, they feel good. It's strange to say that the Franks feel like a potent flank civilization in team games. That is not something I ever thought I'd be saying. But yeah, they're pretty solid on a lot of different map types. And yeah, their archers are pretty bad, but now that the throwing axemen are stronger as well, I think the civilization is diverse enough and at the right sort of power level where you want civilizations to be. And yeah, civilization's fine. Oh, Goths. This is an odd one. Goths have been picked last or next to last, I believe, every single time in Battle of Africa for the civilization drafts. And that just goes to show that the civilization's in a bit of a weak spot. I think that some changes you can make would be to give their infantry discount starting in the Dark Age. It wouldn't actually be as big a deal as it may seem in terms of their drush, but yeah, I think it would help their early game a little bit. They're supposed to be sort of like a rush you down civilization, and they're weak. Their early game is really weak, and that kind of feels, counterintuitive to what the civilization wants. So giving them the infantry discount in the Dark Age actually still requires them to gather gold if they want to do anything more than a 3 militia drush. But they can do a 3 militia drush, just fine. And they wouldn't have to gather the extra 10 gold. And I don't know, I think that's a perfectly fine change. And then I would change their villagers plus 5 attack versus wild boar bonus to something like villagers take 3 less damage from boar. Again, just to give them a bit more of a consistent early game. And, that attack bonus versus boar is pretty useless, and sometimes hurts you when you forget you're playing Goths and then you kill your boar like 5 tiles from your town center and then you just feel kind of dumb. So let's not do that anymore. So next up here we have the old AOC favorite in the Huns, and I actually think they're fine. They're a good civilization, but not like completely dominant as they were in Age of Conquerors. After they got their nerfs to their cav archers, and houses being cheaper for everyone else like kind of negates their bonus a little bit. And yeah, I think the civilization's fine. Incas, pretty much the same as the Huns, actually. I don't think the civilization is actually too powerful. Again, it's a strong civilization, but they don't really have like an overpowering late game, especially in team games. I think the civilization is much more suited to late game 1v1s, and they don't have the economy bonuses
like throughout the game that the Mayans and Aztecs do. So yeah, I think the civilization is fine. Again, just pending all of the eagle nerfs I mentioned. And of course, when I'm talking about the Raja civilizations, keep in mind that I'm talking about them in the context of them already receiving nerfs to all the battle elephants. Oh boy, now we have the Indians. Yep, this is a civilization, all right. It's just so... Again, it's one of the civilizations that kind of does everything. And civilizations shouldn't do everything and have it all be super powerful. They have a great archery range. Their barracks is actually pretty good. Obviously, they have their imperial camels, and they have fully upgraded hussars, and they have good monks. And they even have pretty good siege. Like, this civ does way too much, as well as having one of the best economy bonuses in the game. So the changes I would make here would actually be for this civilization to lose halberdier. No civilization that has amazing camels has access to halberdier except the Indians, who have the best camels. When I say other good camel civilizations, we can look at the Saracens who don't have halberdier, the Malians who don't have halberdier, the Berbers who don't have halberdier. This is just like, why does the civilization with the best camels have the best halberdier? And if you, I guess, if I'm not being clear, halberdiers and camels relate to each other because they're both anti-cavalry options. Camels being the gold-intensive counter, halberdiers being the trash counter. So I'd remove that unit from them. And yeah, I think beyond that, they're actually pretty okay. I think the Indians would be okay after that. Rounding out our I civilizations from FE, we have the Italians here. And this is another civilization that I think is perfectly fine. I kind of disliked the Kondo nerf, making the unit weaker, but still not having it require like an upgrade or anything. I would have preferred the Kondo to stay at its previous strength level of having one more attack and one more pierce armor, if I recall correctly. And then requiring, like, you know, some sort of like 500 food, 400 gold upgrade before you can start researching them. Because the real problem with this unit before was that you could just spam them the second Imperial Age came in, and that's just really stupid. But now the unit's just kind of weaker overall, and I think less interesting because of it. So I guess, I don't know, personally I would, change that. But other than that, I think Italians are perfectly fine on land maps. On water maps, they might need a little bit more of a discount, but honestly, we haven't seen enough high-level water games on the expansions to really sort of nail that down. And, they're supposed to be a water civilization. They're a naval civilization. So, yeah, I don't know. This civilization's probably fine. Speaking of civilizations that are fine, we have the Japanese. They're fine. They have a very open, broad, diverse tech tree, but really lacking that sort of late-game, gold-intensive deathball-y unit. And they lack a sort of mid-game eco bonus. But again, to compensate, they have one of the broadest military tech trees in the game, so this civilization's fine. Oh boy, we have the Khmer. The worst civilization in the game, in my opinion. And that's saying a lot. Obviously, if any of you have seen my 1v1 Arabia tier list video, I put Khmer at the bottom. I still stand by that decision. I think the civilization, it's too weird, right? Their focus is on battle elephants and on scorpions, both of which are incredibly situational. So what I would do is I would give the civilization Thumb Ring. I say it all the time on stream, so if you watch my stream, then you know what I'm talking about. With Thumb Ring, the civilization actually has access to fully upgraded heavy cavalry archers, which is pretty good. It gives the civilization another solid late-game option that isn't elephants, or I guess generic cavalier. So I think that would actually go a really long way with this civilization. And then I would also have them receive the Hussar upgrade. Because they're supposed to be like a cavalry civilization. I know it says elephant, but that's like a cavalry, and the trash line is already fairly weak. And they don't obviously have really an eco bonus to speak of. So I think giving them Hussar would definitely go a long way as well. But I think beyond that, I think the civilization's pretty fine. I say pretty fine because that just goes to show how these civilizations aren't that far off from being pretty well balanced, in my opinion. Moving right along here, we have the Koreans, a civilization that everyone hates playing against, with good reason, in my opinion. So the sort of thing with this civilization these days is that their trush is just so oppressive. Having the faster working or builders, I guess, in terms of building towers, as well as the faster stone miners, as well as the free tower upgrades, as well as the tower range, that's just way too much. And it's just so hard to deal with the Korean trush, and it just makes the civilization feel really one-dimensional, which isn't terribly fun or interesting. So I would personally remove this bonus, the walls, towers, castles built 33% faster, and I would replace it with a new bonus, which would be fish last 30% longer. And I think that would actually be a pretty good change for the Koreans. It would make them more of a naval civilization, because right now you don't really ever see Koreans picked in water maps, other than a deathmatch. But I think the civilization should have more of a defensive naval civilization identity. And fish lasting longer would be really helpful, because obviously you have so few locations of fish, and every fish that you deplete means a significantly longer trip for your fishing ships. So I think that would sort of help the Koreans again in that sort of defensive naval civilization identity. I mean, 30%, I mean, the number doesn't really matter that much. I mean, if you want to argue that it should only be 20%, then I won't complain. It's more about the idea rather than the actual numbers. And then the other thing I would do is give them elite cannon galleon. They already don't have demolition ships of any kind whatsoever. I don't see why a naval civilization shouldn't also have access to elite cannon galleon then. I don't think that would be too big a deal. Now we have the Magyars, and after the changes, I think the Magyars are fine. Yeah. They play kind of like the Huns, but they're thematically similar civilizations, and they're a bit weaker in the mid-game than the Huns, and a bit stronger in the late game. But other than that, I don't know, the civilization's fine. You don't need to do anything to it. Oh boy, Malay are one of those civilizations that's definitely a problem civilization, because they do the Goth infantry spam better than the Goths. Because Karambits are just so cheap and quick to produce that it actually overruns Goth infantry. And the free two-handed swordsman in terms of gold cost is just massive. Like, technically, Goth players will be able to swamp Malay two-handed swordsman, but Goth players still spend gold on their units. The Malay player doesn't. All they have to do is outlast the Goths. And like, the Karambits are just so cheap and so quick to produce, it compares to the Goth infantry again. And the Malay, of course, they do stuff other than infantry. They have fully upgraded arbalests, and they have an amazing navy. They have bombard towers. They have good monks. Like, come on. The civilization needs to lose something. And I think what they would need to have is having the elite Karambit warrior train in 8 seconds as opposed to 6. Well, I mean, they both train in 6 seconds, so they both train in 8 seconds. Yeah, I think that would sort of ease the flood a little bit, and kind of prevent the Malay from overshadowing the Goths. But beyond that, the civilization is fine. You know that if, again, in my 1v1 Arabia tier list video, I think the Malay are pretty overrated on Arabia. So next up, we have the Malians. Probably one of the best probably the best civilization in the game, I would say, actually, right now. Just looking across all different map types and game modes and stuff, the civilization is just so good. It has the cheaper wood costing buildings, and the free gold mining upgrades just means that the civilization has 2 incredibly powerful eco bonuses, as well as a super wide tech tree. You compare that to a civilization like the Chinese, who also have a very wide tech tree. They don't have the eco bonuses. Yeah, I don't know. This civilization is just really hard to balance, in my opinion. Um, I'll be honest, I'm not entirely sure what to do without making the civilization like suck, because it already has like a fairly weak post-imperial, and I don't, you don't want the civilization to just be awful. Maybe remove Arbalest. I don't know. A suggestion from the YouTuber, streamer, caster Nobody. He's suggested removing bloodlines for this civilization. I think that's actually pretty interesting because you still have Farimba, and the Malian cavalry is really good. Maybe that would make them too weak. I'm not entirely sure. But I don't know. It might be worth testing. Again, of all the civilizations, I know the least what to do with Malians, but they need something because they're just way too good on way too many game modes. Mayans here. Mayans are fine. Yeah. Assuming again the Eagle Warrior nerfs come through, the civilization's fine. It's a good civilization, but you'll always have some civilizations that are better than others, and I'm fine with Mayans like being on the better end if that's where they're going to be at. Mongols, I actually think the civilization in a vacuum is quite well balanced, but because again, a lot of the newer civilizations especially overshadow the Mongols, like the Berbers and the Indians and the Malians and stuff. I think the civilization should be fine. I don't think they need a buff. Their Mangudai in the late game are still incredibly strong. Still have excellent Hussars as well. They have Arbalests. Yeah, I think the civilization should be fine, like in the context of the other civilizations getting nerfed. Persians are a civilization that I don't know, it goes hand in hand with the Mongols, I feel. This civilization, it feels like weaker than it should. The civilization's good. It has a pretty flexible tech tree. It has an amazing economy bonus with their town center work rate increase, but they don't have Bracer, which is just such a huge tech to miss. And of course their monks are terrible. They have such bad monks. So yeah, I don't know. I feel like the civilization should be fine, again, in the context of the other civilizations getting nerfed, but the sort of like overall power level of civilizations like the Persians, like the Mongols, like the Celts, and then Britons, and all that stuff, Japanese as well. I think that's kind of where you should be shooting for in terms of civilization balance. Now we have the Portuguese, which are another civilization that is so hard to balance because at the launch of African kingdoms, this civilization was just so completely dominant in especially like lower level games because you just don't have answers to all of the bombard towers, and if people are playing on pop limits other than 200, then the Fetorias can really get out of hand really quickly. So again, it's kind of hard to balance. Personally, I would make the Fetorias cost instead of costing stone and gold, maybe cost a ton of food and wood, like way more food and wood than they used to. Like other than that, I think now that they do cost stone and gold, I would increase the gold and stone generation rates for the Feitoria. Because Feitorias are just so much slower than 20 villagers, as it says here in the little tech description. And it's just, why would you ever build this building? Like, the reason you would make it in the first place is the slow, infinite trickle of gold and stone at the cost of, 20 population space. And having it just so slow in producing gold and stone, and then also costing gold and stone, I don't know, I feel like that's too much. And then the other change I would do is to make Arquebus, which is this ballistics for gunpowder units. I'd make it also improve the natural accuracy of gunpowder units. Like the hand cannoneer accuracy is, I think, 65? Yeah, 65. Maybe like boost the natural accuracy to like 75 or something. I don't know. The numbers aren't specific. It's more like the idea, again. But beyond that, I think the civilization should be all right. Oh, poor Saracens. Poor, poor Saracens. Yeah, they're just so power corrupt by the Indians and Berbers and Malians. Like they're like the fourth best camel civ, and they're supposed to be the camel civ. So I think the change that I would make is remove this garbage bonus of cavalry archers and genitors having +4 attack versus buildings, because that's almost never used. It's actually a lot less useful than the foot archer +2 attack versus building bonus, which does see some use in the early feudal age when you're trying to knock down palisade walls with your archers. Like that, in this situation, the Saracen team bonus is actually pretty good. However, this bonus is absolutely garbage and pretty much never sees use. So what I would do is I'd replace this bonus with archery range units move 10% faster, let's say. I mean, again, the number doesn't have to be specific. It could be 5%, it could be 15%, I don't know. But I think I like the idea of making their archery range units move faster, because it would really sort of showcase the fact that the Saracens have a completely full archery range tech tree, one of 2 civilizations in the game to have so. And it would be a nice little boost to their, all of their archery range units, and that kind of makes their camels very strong, as well as their archers and their siege and monks. And I think that sort of gives them the powerful, diverse military that they're supposed to have as a civilization, because they don't really have an eco bonus. So giving them a bit of a better military bonus on land maps, I think, is the solution for this civilization, so to say. So now we have the Slavs, who seem really good after the farming rate bug thing was fixed in the last patch. I don't know if they're too strong right now. I mean, obviously they're really good, but I think they should be fine. I think Slavs should be perfectly fine. I would definitely not want to change anything right now for the civilization. We may need to in the future, but I think as of when I'm recording this video, it's fine. Spanish are also in a perfectly fine spot, in my opinion. They're not as oppressive as they used to be in team games. And again, Spanish are another one of those civilizations that I think are pretty much perfectly balanced. Literally the most open tech tree in the game. I believe this civilization has the most available units and technologies. And then at the cost of that, they don't have crossbowmen. They're the only civilization in the game to not have crossbowmen. And then on top of that, they don't really have an eco bonus. So yeah, that'd be the only change I'd make. Teutons, I think they're a pretty good civilization right now. I actually think they're pretty underrated. The one change I would make to them is I'd give them husbandry. I think that would be enough to make them, I think, just a little bit more viable, which I think the civilization needs, just like a little bit more viable. They already, have the identity as like the slow, heavy civilization, because they don't have light cav. They're the only civilization in the game that has scout cavalry but does not have light cavalry. So I don't think you need to further make them slower by having them not have husbandry. They already have the Teutonic Knight. That should be slow enough for everybody. But beyond that, the civilization's fine. The single most OP civilization in the game, the Turks, are actually, I think, pretty okay. Like, people always rag on the civilization for being absolutely terrible, and yeah, they suck when they don't have gold, which makes them pretty bad in 1v1s, but they're a really solid team game civilization, and they're a really solid arena civilization. I think if you were to make a change, we could, like, potentially give them, like, elite skirmisher or pikeman, like, one of the two, not both for sure. But even then, that might make the civilization, like, way too strong. So, yeah, I definitely would be very careful in balancing the Turks, because I actually think they're in a pretty okay spot. Okay, so Vietnamese, the last of the new civilizations, and one that needs the most work in my opinion. I've said it many times on stream, and also I think in some YouTube videos. I think this civilization plays like a worse Mayans. You have the archers. The Rattan archer is just a more extreme plumed archer. and they don't have the eco bonus, and they don't have the eagle warriors. So yeah, I think this civilization needs a bit more than just a simple tweak. So the first thing I would change is, instead of the reveal enemy positions at game start, which I think is just a pretty poorly designed bonus, honestly, it encourages laming. And yeah, like maybe you can lure some deer safely or whatever without having to go scout your opponent as quickly, but that's kind of a niche situation because, what if you don't have deer that you can lure because they're behind a forest? Like, that just, I don't know. It seems pretty weird, and it just encourages laming. And the bonus I would give them is giving all of their units +1 LOS. Every single unit +1 LOS. I actually think that would be a pretty strong bonus. It's just so versatile, it affects literally all of their units. And yeah, having a very high LOS is really important in this game, so you can better predict where your enemy's coming from. So that, I think that would actually be a really interesting change, and I really like that. As far as giving the civilization another powerful bonus, because other than their archery range HP bonus, they don't really have any powerful bonuses. Also, I would give them masonry. I don't know why they don't have masonry. The only other civilization in the game that doesn't have masonry is the Aztecs, and I guess the Byzantines, but they don't count. Yeah, I feel like there's no reason the Civ shouldn't have masonry. They're supposed to be a late game civilization. Their buildings should not be built of paper mache. Like, yes, they're going to be very powerful with their Imperial Skirmisher like clump, but I don't think you need to go whole hog and have them lack masonry like the Aztecs. Lastly, for the civilization, I would change paper money, because this is just such a silly tech. Tributes 500 gold to each ally. That costs gold, and also a ton of food. Yeah. I don't know. I just don't like the design of this technology. What I would do is I would change this technology so that trade units and markets both have plus 100% health. Again, it could be plus 50%, could be plus 75%. Like, the number doesn't matter that much. It's more the idea of making this a powerful team game bonus, or team game technology, I guess, that would really help out literally everyone on the team. Or even if it just applies to the Vietnamese player, having your trade units that much more difficult to raid would be huge. Think of 140 HP trade carts. That's insane. Like, that would be such a good upgrade in the late game. So I think that's definitely a pretty interesting idea there. Last but not least, we get to end on an easy one. We have the Vikings. Vikings are fine. Again, so long as galleys are a bit better in dealing with fire galleys, I think they're still a top-tier water civilization. They have one of the best booms in the game because of their free wheelbarrow and handcart. And yeah, to compensate for that, they have a pretty weak land-based late game, but Chieftains helps with the pikeman thing, and they now have the buffed berserks, and yeah, the civilization's fine. So yeah, that ends this long-ass rant on Age of Empires 2 balance and design. Yeah, those are the changes I'd make. Obviously some of them I'm a lot more confident in than others, but I think the general direction of those changes, I think, are definitely at least worth exploring. And I think in general the new civs kind of power creep a lot of the old ones, like poor Saracens and Chinese and Persians and Mongols. They feel like they should be a lot more powerful than they are, and I don't think it's that those civilizations necessarily need buffs in some cases. It's more of that the new civilizations need to be toned back down a bit, which I understand. Like, you want the new civilizations to be powerful, so people use them. You want to incentivize people to use the new stuff, but I think it's time to bring the new civs, I think, in line with the older ones. So other than that, thank you all for watching. Please do leave a like if you enjoyed, which I would assume you did if you listened to this rant. It's probably going to be like 45 minutes or something.
But yeah, hope you all enjoyed, and I will see you in the next video. Peace.